Just want to get your scorecards out now. Yes, 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 yes and yes. Now we've got 9 minutes and 50 to fill in. As the introduction said, my name's Brad Scott. I'm the Greens candidate for the federal seat of Bowman, which is the next one over from Bonner. Standing in for David tonight, who's away on business, but it's a great pleasure actually. Come and have a look. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of land and thank them for looking after it for the last 38,000 years, because they did a fairly good job. The Greens are not just an environment party. We have 43 policies on a range of social and economic issues like health, education, affordable housing and workplace rights. Have a read at the Greens site, greens.org.au, or come and see me after the forum and I'll give you policy snapshots, because it's very important that you realise we're not just an environmental party. But now to climate change. I think we'd all agree that climate change is now an indisputable reality. I know Chris does. And yet our federal and state governments are still not taking it seriously. This is despite the dangers that climate change poses to Queensland in particular. Widespread bleaching of the Great Barrier Reef, wilder weather with cyclones, storm surges, more bushfires, sea level rises, and the extinction of between 10 and 30% of our biodiversity are all results of this. Climate change could devastate our agricultural industries, make it impossible for our water-dependent industries to survive, and threaten our tourism economy. The dangers are overwhelming, yet the response to date from both major parties has been pitiful. The international scientific consensus says we need an 80% target by 2050. Now that's based on 1990 levels of emissions, and we also need targets for 2020. It is such science that has formed the Greens' federal climate change policy. We have the solutions. Our policy is to constrain global warming to less than 2 degrees. To do that, we would introduce binding, science-based targets for greenhouse gas reduction, an 80% reduction in emissions by 2050 and a 30% reduction by 2020 based on 1990 levels. We'll come back to that. We must phase out subsidies which promote the use of fossil fuels, currently running at more than $6 billion. Similarly, we want public funds for research in clean coal redirected into renewable technology. The rich coal sector should be funding their own clean coal research, not the public purse. They can afford it, we can't. Instead, provide substantial public funding for renewable energy projects and energy efficiency, including the establishment of a thriving export industry for renewables. We want solar PV, we want solar thermal, we want wind, wave, hydro, bioenergy, geothermal and energy efficiency to be the focus of all the subsidies that the fossil fuel sector is currently getting. All the renewable sources I've just mentioned can provide baseload power, so we can strike that myth off. There is no need at all for the dangerous, slow, expensive and polluting nuclear power. The Greens oppose all aspects of the nuclear cycle, including uranium mining. Unfortunately, this is another point of difference between us and the old parties. More and more renewable energy manufacturing companies are leaving Australia because there is no future for them here without a serious renewable energy target. So we want to introduce a mandatory renewable energy target which requires electricity suppliers to source 15% of their energy from renewable sources by 2012 and 25% by 2020. And it must be a genuine renewable only target, not a gift to the coal industry. We don't want any new coal-fired power stations or coal mines licensed. And with the boost in renewable energy, they shouldn't be necessary either. We want all future energy needs to be met using renewable resources. And we want to develop a plan to assist affected communities to transition from dependence on coal mines and coal-fired power stations. We've got to send the international community a signal that we are serious, so we need to ratify Kyoto. Then we should take a leading role in negotiating a post-Kyoto multilateral agreement that has binding emission targets for all countries. and we should help countries in our region adapt to mitigate climate change with appropriate technology transfer and other forms of assistance. We should be very focused on the leadership role we should be playing in our region. We need a carbon trading scheme that involves a substantial cap on emissions, with real carbon pricing and not just a permit to pollute. In the home, we would increase subsidies for solar panels and improve energy efficiency by offering rebates for retrofitting existing housing with energy-saving devices and by increasing the feed-in tariff for renewable energy generated by a home and fed back into the grid. We would significantly increase the stringency of mandatory energy performance standards, MEPS, for products, for buildings and for infrastructure. In the transport sector, we want a funding boost to public transport with less money spent on new roads. We would remove the GST on public transport and phase in stringent fuel efficiency standards. We would also implement financial incentives for the Australian production of hybrids and electric cars. In summary, the Greens believe that the real answers lie with breaking Queensland's addiction to coal and becoming world leaders in job-rich renewable energy, energy efficiency and public transport. We would help coal miners and coal communities by providing just transitions funding and retraining into the renewable energy sectors. Australians could benefit for the tens of thousands of new manufacturing, maintenance and operations jobs in renewable energy and in public transport. And by limiting climate change to 2 degrees, we could protect the 63,000 people employed in the tourism industry around the Great Barrier Reef, probably not to the extent that we first thought. The Greens have a responsible plan for Australia's future, and one that will see a strong economy based on renewable energy and tourism of our natural areas, and one which will ensure our children and our children's children still have the chance to see the beauty of the Great Barrier Reef, can enjoy the diversity of wildlife we enjoy, and the quality of life we have on a world that still supports us. In closing, I would like to draw an analogy to best describe where our policy sits compared to the other parties here tonight. The target we have set is 80% reduction of 1990 levels by 2050. We're in a race at the moment, and the race officials are the IPCC. They've set the racetrack up. The trip is from Brisbane to Sydney, where Sydney represents the 80% finish line. The coalition say, we now accept that they probably need to get to Sydney at some stage. Trust us to get there, but in the meantime we're heading off in the opposite direction to Cairns. I know it's a bit warmer, but apparently there's a great reef that we need to see before it turns white. What do Labor say? Labor say we have a bus and we bought a map. We can get you as far as Newcastle by 2050, and we can hopefully look at the mythical stuff, clean coal. Unfortunately, all the towns between here and Newcastle aren't on our map, but we still know the general direction. Family first. This sounds like a good idea. We need to find some people to come along, and we can probably hire a bus. As long as we don't lose any money on the way and stop every Sunday, we'll be there. Where is Sydney again? Don't worry, we'll follow that other bus. The Democrats. We know exactly where Sydney is and we know how to get there. Unfortunately, we can't make up our mind who should drive the bus, and it looks like the wheels might just fall off. The Greens. The bus has been packed and ready to go now for the past 15 years. We have a detailed roadmap and we can tell you where we will be 2020, 2030, 2040, 2050. And when we're the first to arrive in Sydney, we'll keep going to Melbourne. Thank you.
Authorised by James Whelan, The Big Switch, Brisbane.